Hello everyone, welcome back. Alright, this is part 2 of Mongol Season 1 full from Genghis to Kublai. First one went a little bit longer. This one will go a little bit longer. It'll still end up being 3 parts. I think we'll call it here 23 minutes. So we'll break this down into 3 parts. Ow, hit my foot, and go. Nose itches. Okay.
After Mongol generals Subutai and Jebe and their 20,000 warriors failed to catch up to the Khwarezmian Shah, they spent the winter of 1220 in Iran and Azerbaijan, raiding and looting while preventing the Western Khwarezmian forces from assisting Jalal ad-Din to the east. Here they conceived the idea of conducting the most audacious reconnaissance in force in history. In 1221, the army first entered the Kingdom of Georgia, where they pillaged the countryside for supplies. The king, George IV, seeing his lands ravaged by the invaders, assembled an army which included many knights who had pledged to join the Fifth Crusade. In the ensuing battle at Sagami, Subutai feigned a retreat, which lured the slower, heavily armoured cavalry away from their infantry before he encircled and massacred them. The Mongols then returned to Azerbaijan and Iran and burned and pillaged a few more cities. In a few months, Georgia was invaded by Subutai yet again. George IV attempted to stop the invaders near Tbilisi, but his army was ambushed yet again. These battles weakened Georgia and allowed the Mongols to pass through the Caucasus Mountains. Subutai pushed his forces through the mountains during the winter. His troops took heavy casualties and were exhausted. When they descended from the mountains, their army was met by a coalition of the local Lezgins, Alans, Kipchaks and Volga Bulgarians. The enemy army had more than 50,000 troops. At first, the Mongols charged but were repelled. The coalition decided to hold their ground and wait for the Mongols to die of starvation. Low on supplies and unable to outmaneuver his opponent, Subutai secretly sent bribes to the Kipchaks, who made up most of the force, appealing to them as fellow nomads. In the middle of the following night, the Kipchaks left and headed home. Subutai immediately charged the remaining troops and defeated them. However, he didn't stop there and ordered his horsemen to chase after the Kipchaks, who were slowed by the baggage train of treasures they had received. The Mongols slaughtered them as well, and then razed the wealthy city of Astrakhan on the Volga River. Finding themselves on familiar flat terrain, with plenty of villages to pillage, Jebe and Subutai now parted their forces. Jebe travelled towards the Dnieper River, while Subutai moved south to the Crimea. Subutai and the local Venetian trading post entered an alliance, and the Mongol general promised to destroy any non-Venetian colonies in the area. Indeed, he attacked and razed Soldaya, and in return, the Venetians provided the Mongols with information about the kingdoms of Europe. Meanwhile, the surviving Kipchaks fled and informed the Rus princes of their plight. The area of modern Russia and Ukraine was controlled by a number of Rus principalities. They united into one alliance to defend against the Mongols. With the addition of the Kipchak forces, this alliance had a combined force of around 60,000 troops, mainly cavalry. The Mongols united into one army also, and then sent ambassadors to the Rus princes, telling them to stay out of the conflict as it didn't involve them and the Mongol quarrel was with the Kipchaks alone. but the princes broke the golden rule. They killed the envoys. The allied army caught up to the Mongols on the banks of the Dnieper River and tried to encircle them. Subutai sacrificed a rearguard of 1,000 men who held the enemy, while the rest of the army crossed the river and retreated east. The Russians now discussed how to follow up this minor victory. Some urged to pursue the Mongols, while others argued to hold the frontier, but it was the vengeful Kipchaks who tipped the scales, and the princes decided to chase the Mongols. Each prince marched separately from the others, miles apart. For 9 days, the Mongols retreated just ahead of their pursuers. They used hit-and-run tactics while leaving behind loot, prisoners and livestock, giving the Russians a sense that they were winning. However, this was a trap. By the end of the 9th day, the Kipchak vanguard was way ahead of the rest of the army and smashed against the Mongols. Subutai ordered a retreat, crossing the small Kalka River, with the Kipchaks hot on their tail and the Russian princes lagging behind even more. With all the pieces in place, Subutai sent his heavy lancers charging against the unprepared Kipchaks from the front, while his horse archers attacked the Rus with arrows to further slow their advance. Under cover of arrows, the heavy lancers kept ploughing with ever-growing momentum against the unorganized Rus, who were charging at them one prince at a time. Every Rus who was not slain during the initial impact was funneled by the arrow fire into a narrow corridor, which forced them to smash against the forces behind them, creating a domino effect. The battlefield became the most chaotic at the river itself. The only army with a resemblance of a formation was that of Mstislav of Kiev, who had previously advised caution. He rallied his 10,000 and many of those who were retreating to meet the charging Mongols. Baggage trains were arranged into a fortified circle on high ground to become a beacon for the fleeing soldiers. The Mongols soon surrounded this position. Here Mstislav held out for 3 terrible days while being showered with whistling arrows and bombarded with smoke bombs. The defenders were left with no water and had to accept the Mongol offer of a peaceful surrender, but as soon as they left the protection of their camp, they were attacked. The allies were surrounded on all sides except for a small gap, intentionally left open, giving hope to many who took this chance to escape. Subutai laid this trap, as he preferred to have those men be killed in smaller groups by the faster horse archers who picked them off one by one.
I'm not a fan of this guy and the way he does things, where he like bribes people and then he kills them. He makes you think like you can be, a piece, and then he kills you. Like, this is a guy who I would just kill, brutally have killed in front of his own men. Like, I'm talking like, you make his men watch him be skinned alive kind of thing. Just because this to me is like, you don't do that. I think that goes against everything. But I didn't live in this time, so it's easy for me to say that because warfare is much different now.
Only 1 in 10 warriors in the Allied army managed to avoid death or capture. As for Mstislav of Kiev and the Rus nobles, they were tied up and placed beneath a wooden platform on which the Mongol generals feasted, while the Russians were crushed beneath them. Subutai then passed through the other side of the Caspian Sea, defeating even more Kipchaks and Volga Bulgars on the way back to Mongolia. While the Mongols didn't conquer new lands on this grand expedition, they gained knowledge about the landscape, the people, and their armies. Upon returning from the Great Raid, Subutai wasted no time resting, as he was assigned a new mission, punishing the vassal kingdom of Xixia for not contributing to the Mongol campaigns. Genghis Khan never tolerated betrayal, and so he mustered a colossal force. Only this time the Mongols knew the territory and the art of the siege. The kingdom quickly fell and the emperor was murdered. However, before the invasion began, Genghis fell from his horse and injured his shoulder. He quickly developed a high fever and was advised to go back to Mongolia and rest, but the great Khan pushed forward. Life is full of irony, and the Xixia would be the very first and the very last people conquered by Genghis. On August 18, 1227, at the age of 66, Genghis Khan passed away. Genghis's empire endured after his death through a series of laws he developed and the capable children he had raised. He had tried multiple times to deal with the looming question of succession. Before the campaign in Khwarezm, he gathered his 4 sons in a tent and prepared to break another Mongol tradition, according to which when a father died, his domain was inherited by the youngest son, while the herd was divided between the rest. Genghis Khan, however, urged his sons to maintain the unity of the empire they helped him build, and asked Jochi to take the floor and speak his mind. Before he could say a word, Chagatai, who rumors claimed was the real firstborn to Genghis, insulted him, saying that he was not one of them and that he would never follow him as Great Khan. Genghis decided the best way to keep the empire intact was to give each son lands where they could settle and rule as long as they respected the Great Khan.
No, they will not. I don't know, but I just feel like as soon as he's gone, that threat is gone, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. That's just my opinion. I don't know much about Genghis. All I know is that we don't know where he's buried, and the people who could tell us, they were all killed. Outside of that, I don't know much about him. He's a fascinating man, though.
Third son, Ogedei, would be the one to ascend to the throne. Jochi was promised Persia and Europe. Chagatai was given Central Asia. Ogedei would get China, while the youngest, Tului, would take care of Mongolia. And so this family dispute over the empire of one man led to lines being drawn all over the known world, creating a division which put the Mongol legacy in danger. Genghis Khan passed away in 1229, and his son Ogedei became the Great Khan. He was a talented administrator who transformed the Mongols from a tributary to a tax-based empire and commissioned the construction of the capital, Karakoram. He developed the Yasa law, created a postal service, introduced paper currency, and created civil service exams open to everyone, while implementing a culture of religious tolerance. This colossal shift from nomadic to bureaucratic governance led to a period of prosperity called the Pax Mongolica. In the next few decades, Mongol conquests had 3 main directions: Central and Southern China, Central Asia, Iran, the Caucasus and the Middle East, and modern-day Russia and Eastern Europe. As these 3 were often detached theatres, each of the next 3 videos will focus on one direction, starting with the invasion of Europe. In 1235, the Mongol Kurultai decided to send a big army to conquer Europe. 130,000, commanded by the son of Jochi, Batu, headed to the region. By 1237, Volga Bulgaria was conquered. Crimea and the lands of the Kipchaks, Alans and others were next, and by the end of summer of that year, all the lands to the east of the Don River belonged to the Mongols. In November, Batu Khan sent his envoys to the court of Prince Yuri II of Vladimir Suzdal and demanded his allegiance. It is not clear what happened during this embassy, but in February of 1238, the capital of the princedom, Vladimir, was razed by the Mongols. The chronology of events are open to debate, but we know that in 1238 and 1239, many Rus princedoms were destroyed and their capitals were razed. The Mongols moved fast, dividing and conquering along the way, not allowing the Rus to unite their forces. The biggest open battle of this campaign happened near the river Sit, and the Mongols prevailed. The only major cities to escape destruction were Novgorod and Pskov, as they accepted Mongol authority. By the end of 1239, the Mongols returned beyond the Don. Batu had to send some of his forces south to help in the conquest of the Caucasus, while the forces of Mongke were recalled to Mongolia, so the Mongols spent the spring of 1240 recruiting troops from local tribes. In the summer of the same year, the Mongols restarted their offensive. The biggest, most prosperous Rus city, Kiev, was besieged in September. The envoys sent in were killed, and the city fell after a 3-month-long siege. All 50,000 locals were massacred. With the Rus principalities belonging to the Golden Horde, the Mongols now looked towards Central Europe. The Venetians delivered on their deal with Subutai and provided him with valuable information on the kingdoms they were facing, which allowed him to plan a devastating campaign against all of Europe. In December of 1240, the Mongols were ready to pounce on Poland and Hungary. Batu sent several messengers to the High Duke of Poland, Henry II, and the King of Hungary, Bela IV. Both of these envoys were killed. The Mongols invaded Central Europe in 3 columns. The first group was tasked with distracting Poland, Baidar, Khadan and Orda with 2 Tumans. The second, mainly Batu and Subutai with 3 to 4 Tumans, crossed the Carpathian Mountains through the Vareke Pass, and a third followed the Danube River. In late 1240, the first force advanced against Poland with a remarkable speed of 50 miles per day, sacking Lublin and Sandomierz on the 13th of February 1241. They then split their force. 1 Tuman under Orda moved to central Poland, and another under Baidar and Khadan swept south, defeating a small contingent at the Battle of Tursko in late February 1240. The capital of Poland, Kraków, was abandoned, looted, and then burned. Then the Mongols advanced on the central city of Silesia, Wrocław, which was left undefended by the Polish nobility in the hope of buying more time to assemble an army. While setting up for a siege of the city, Baidar and Khadan received reports that a great host was marching towards them, so they turned from Wrocław to intercept the Polish army before it got a chance to unite with the big Bohemian army. The 2 armies met on April 9th at the field of Legnica. The Polish army, led by Henry II, had around 7,000 to 8,000 troops, most of them from Poland, with contingents from Moravia, Bavaria and the Teutonic Order, while the Mongol force under Baidar was slightly less numerous, with around 6,000 troops. The Polish force consisted of heavy cavalry, infantry and peasants, while the Mongol force was made up of the usual horse archers and heavy lancers. The battlefield was a plain surrounded by small rivers. The centre of the Christian army consisted of 3 lines of cavalry, with infantry on the flanks and a smaller reserve under Henry in the rear. Baidar divided his troops into 4 divisions, each with a mix of horse archers and lancers. The first line of the Polish cavalry charged against the Mongol vanguard, but was pushed back after some initial success. Henry then sent the rest of his cavalry forward, and this time, under the pressure, the Mongols began to withdraw. The allied cavalry gave chase, separating themselves from the infantry. a signal was given by the Mongol commander to set fire to the plants growing on the field. This created a dense smoke and smell, unbearable to the Christian army, and its infantry on the flanks failed to see the battlefield clearly. In that moment, the Mongol horse archers began firing at the confused riders, disorientated by the smoke. The cavalry was annihilated, and that left only the unarmoured peasants on the flanks completely exposed. With no support, the Polish wings were massacred. Henry attempted to flee from the battlefield, but was caught, killed, and beheaded. His severed head was displayed on a pike in front of the town of Legnica, striking fear into the populace. While Baydar was busy slaughtering the Polish nobility at Legnica, 600 kilometers to the south, King Bela of Hungary was lining up his armies for battle after 6 days of chasing the main Mongol force under Batu and Subutai in a campaign eerily similar to Khalkha. He ordered a fortified camp of wagons to be constructed near the Sayo River, refusing to take the bait. While the terrain was plain, the river had flooded and could only be crossed via a narrow 200-meter-long bridge. The Mongols had around 15,000 to 20,000 troops and were outnumbered by the 40,000-strong Hungarian army, of which about 15,000 were cavalry. The Hungarians had contingents from Croatia, Austria, and the Order of the Templars. After hearing that the Mongols were crossing the bridge under the Veil of Darkness, the Hungarians moved, marching 7 kilometers in the dark and descending upon the bridge at midnight. The Mongol vanguard was destroyed as their horse archers were exposed during the night and unprepared for the enemy crossbowmen. The Hungarian army left a small force to guard the bridge as they returned to camp to celebrate, thinking that the invaders had been repulsed. On the morning of April 11th, 1241, Subutai sent a force north to cross through a shallow spot in the river, while he was making his way south via a makeshift bridge. Meanwhile, Batu ordered 7 heavy catapults to bombard and distract the crossbowmen guarding the bridge. After stalling for a while, the northern troops descended upon the bridge guards from the rear and routed them. At the Hungarian camp, a great argument broke out as the king was blamed for not preparing his force for another engagement. This gave time for the Mongols to cross the river. Still, the Hungarians were once again gaining the upper hand as Batu failed to organize his troops in a proper formation. As the Mongols were being pushed against the river with nowhere to run, Subutai miraculously joined the engagement and attacked the Hungarians from the rear. Subutai then rallied the troops, who had seen heavy casualties, and ordered them to surround the Hungarian camp, to which Bela had retreated. Their mangonels bombarded the camp with stones, while archers shot flaming arrows. The Hungarians attempted to break the encirclement on 3 occasions, but were repelled each time. Once again, the Mongols left a gap, giving Hungarian troops hope of escape. Most of the defenders fled for their lives, only to be chased down by more archers lying in ambush. This trick meant that the Mongols would be killing the enemy while they were running instead of fighting for their lives, which allowed them to avoid extra casualties. The Hungarian army ceased to exist. Bela made it to safety, but the entire population of Hungary was left at the mercy of Subutai's troops. In the span of 2 days, the strongest kingdoms of Central Europe were defeated. With free reign over Hungary, the Mongols did what they did best, ravaged the countryside, starting with pest. More than half of the settlements in the plains of Hungary were destroyed. It is said that Hungary lost around 500,000 of its population. The Mongols then invaded Serbia and Bulgaria. These lands were ravaged, and Bulgaria was forced to become a tributary to the Mongols for several decades. As the situation was only getting direr, the Pope called for an anti-Mongol crusade. Meanwhile, the Holy Roman Emperor began to levy his troops and organize a defense. The Mongols were planning to reach the Atlantic Ocean, and there was no army strong enough to stand in their way. However, this was not to occur. The great Khan Ogedei passed away in December of 1241, and Batu, along with most of his troops, had to return to Mongolia to participate in the elections of the next leader of the Mongol Empire. Europe was saved. After his
it's a little short, but I'm going to go ahead and end it there. That was interesting. It makes sense that you would allow your enemy to retreat and run for their life and then chase after them and kill them, because they're not fighting them straight up, so you don't have the risk. The only problem is if they run into allied territory where they have instant protection, but then you can stop and retreat, but then you could be chased. But it's a pretty smart plan. Okay, we're gonna end this here, and then we will be back for the final part 3 of season 1. So there's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate, you don't have to. Subscribe if you'd like to. If you do, click that bell. It notifies you when things happen, like when I'm walking around the house with no shoes on. It'll tell you, I think. I don't know how the thing works. And then there's the thumbs up button. You can click on that and say, hey, we really enjoyed this video. And I'd say, you know what, I appreciate your enjoyment. And then you just have a good day, have a good night.